Some of you have asked that we talk about how to design a better Pokemon Go. So today we are going to indulge in something that we rarely do, speculative design. Let's take the Pokemon Go paradigm and brainstorm up a game designed in the same space that improves on it. So let's assume that our game is in the D&D vein, a swords and sorcery dungeon crawler, because without question, somebody's gonna try to make one of those sooner or later. So first off, we're gonna need a better combat system and a better character system, because in this game, what you're gonna be collecting is gear, not Pokemon. Character equipment has the advantage of being much cheaper content to produce, which would allow for a huge Diablo-style loot table with some handcrafted epic gear thrown in, which in turn means that players will have thousands of things to hunt, rather than just hundreds. Hunting for cool new stuff is the main driver of this type of game after all. But let's talk about how players will acquire their gear to fill up those character sheets. Imagine this. Instead of Pokestops, locations would be hidden caches of treasure, like the sites of old battles, that sort of thing. These would be the basic loot pickups. You'd find consumables in them, but you'd also have a chance of finding gear. Maybe not great gear, but gear nonetheless. The thing about this gear, though, is that it would be level restricted. So how do you level? Well, imagine if, rather than catching Pokemon, you fight monsters. Where in Pokemon Go you would see a capturable Pokemon, here instead you would find a combat encounter that you could try your skill at. The system here could be simple. I mean, even a basic turn-based RPG combat system would be better than what we have in Go, and it would have the added bonus of being something that was easier to do while walking around than trying to swipe throw a Pokeball. If the game has a wide enough variety of abilities and equipment, finding an encounter that's higher level than you, offering awesome loot and XP for success, could be an exciting strategic experience. And if you throw in the possibility of maybe being able to set up a couple of equipment loadouts that you could choose from at the start of the battle, that would create more interesting uses for the loot that you find, and add a whole new layer of depth to your planning. And if the company wanted to be greedy, they could also sell additional loadout slots. I mean, you gotta sell the executives on the project somehow, right? Next, we'd need achievements. In Pokemon Go, the achievements don't really do anything. Here, the obvious go-to is to have achievements reward you with experience or gold, maybe even gear. But we can do one better than that, I think. Instead, what if we also gave the player quests? Now, it's very tricky to do local quests, ones that are unique to your particular park or neighborhood, so let's just assume that we don't have the tech to do that. That still leaves us with a lot of options. Quests to kill 12 ogres, collect 20 rat tails, find and defeat the Lich Lord, those are all really easy to create. But we can do one cooler. Remember those Poke eggs that you had to walk around to spawn? Imagine if you had a quest that said it would begin in 4 kilometers. Now, the awesome thing about this is that if that's the prerequisite, then as developers, we can do whatever we want with the game when the player gets there. Instead of an egg hatching and you mulching that monster into candy, an event would start. Maybe you would get jumped by 4 gnolls, and you'd have to beat them. Then you'd run into a knight at the crossroads and have to answer his question correctly, or else have to fight him too. Then you'd find a wounded soldier, and if you had a potion in your pack, you could trade it for a random loot drop. Next is the Lake of Fire, which would require that you have 200 fire resist on your equipment, or you fail. And if you get through that, you reach the Lava Drake, which will net you some sweet loot if you can take it down. That's what would spawn on your phone. Once you journeyed far enough and racked up enough steps, the quest would begin, and then you wouldn't have to move at all to proceed further in the quest. It would all just play, shockingly, like a video game. And heck, if you wanted, you could still have eggs which hatch monsters in this game too, because, I mean, why not? Let's see, what else? Well, if you had enough people playing, you could also tag locations not just as a Pokestop, but maybe adding a little bit more flavor. Maybe people could tag places as taverns, wilderness, dungeons. Adding just that little bit of granularity would let you do some cool things when you're designing quests and items. But I think the last big change that would have to be added is some stationary play. Because while the game should be played mostly outside, it's kinda lame that all those awesome things you find as you wander around don't really do anything for you when you're stuck at home. Plus it helps with accessibility, allowing your friends who maybe can't get out much to still get to play with you. You could add a crafting mode where you play a minigame to enchant loot or craft new weapons. For the sake of argument, let's just call it a puzzle quest style match 3 thing. You could also add a daily dungeon that you could play from home, one which can effectively be infinitely difficult because it doesn't have a limit to scaling. You would just have to limit it to being playable once a day, or maybe put in an energy system just to make sure that the focus of the game was still to gather stuff outside. Oh, and finally, there's the question of parties and raids. Both of those things would be amazing. I would have some safety concerns to address before I would try implementing them, but the potential is totally there. But if you did all of that, you would have a much more compelling Pokemon Go style game. Because the truth is, the hard part of creating a real-world game is the tech. Getting the database of locations and doing the monster distribution well, that's the big challenge. But the game design that I described here isn't difficult at all. The costs are basically negligible when compared with the tech cost of making one of these things, which is good because Pokemon Go basically ensured that we're gonna see more real-world games. And design being such a small fraction of the cost makes it really silly to invest all of that money into getting your tech up and running and then not invest just a tiny bit more to create a better actual game for the player. I expect that soon we will all be out questing. Anyway, thank you for indulging us in some speculative design. There's actually a lot of other important design questions that Pokemon Go raises about real-world games. We will tackle those questions soon, I'm sure. Until then, see you next week.